Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech. You know the drill, this is the weekly Q&A session. You ask the questions and hopefully we come back to you with something sound like an answer. Get involved in the comments down there, use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech and we'll go from there. Now you might notice I'm in the dirt shed at the moment. That's because everyone is filming in every studio at the moment, so I'm going to hang out in here while no one's using it. So first question today is from Mark2_Craig. I've had my bike about a year now. Should I be swapping out my tubeless sealant or can I put some more in? To be honest, I just top up on my own, but I'm really familiar with the tyres, the conditions I ride in, the temperatures and the sealant I use. So the first time you're doing this, if you're unsure, I think the best port of advice would be to remove the air from the tyre, sort of deflate them and undo one part of your tyre basically and inspect it and see what sort of state it's in. So it could have dried up completely. It could have like a ball of sealant, especially if you're using something more latex based like stands perhaps. If that's the case, get rid of that ball of sealant and sort of peel out the stuff on the inside. It could have dried up completely or it could still be a bit gloopy. If it's gloopy, I'd be inclined to just top up in there. But again, it does vary depending on what you use. Some of them will run wetter, some will dry up, the more rubber-based ones. Once you're familiar with it, you kind of get a handle on it and you know how much to put in. I'm roughly every 3 to 4 months, I just do a top up and then probably annually, I'll pull the tyre off, clean it all fully, degunk the valves, all that sort of stuff. And I always inject straight through the valve. I never bother taking the tyres off until they're done or I'm swapping a tyre. Yeah, hopefully that's useful for you. Oh, and if you're wondering about squirting directly into the tyre, there's loads of syringes available in the market. We use the Park Tool one. You should see a shot of me using it on screen now. Really useful. Again, clean it out and it'll work forever. Next question is from Reese Rowe. Do tyre inserts expand after time? Now, do you mean physically like absorbing stuff or do you mean stretch? If you mean stretch, I have had some. I mean, I don't really use them that much. I sometimes use them in the rear on bikes, and if I'm going overseas, I'll put them in the rear with an enduro case tyre. But I don't generally use them on most of my bikes. I honestly can't remember which brand, but it was another foamy style one. I did have one get a little bit loose a few years back. Could have been a Nukeproof one, don't really remember, but it's no big deal. You hear them rattling after they've got a bit loose, but you can literally just crimp a bit off essentially and then just rejoin it and then go again. If you're using something like Cush Core that's a very snug fit, then no, you won't have any problems with that. But generally, since the whole sort of pool noodle concept came out, everyone's kind of developed them quite a lot and you're seeing some seriously lightweight ones and some better options that generally don't absorb stuff. But yeah, some may well get a little bit baggy in time. Next up from Tim Sadler. I swear, Tim, you watch every single one of our shows and you comment on every one. I love that you do, thank you. I blew out the Freehub on my Shimano XT rear hub and I was surprised to see the loose bearings, same as the XTR. Needless to say, I went straight to a local mechanic to sort them, but what are the benefits of using loose bearings over a full sealed unit? Okay, I love traditional bearings. So if you're wondering what that is, anyone else out there, you get 2 types of bearings typically that you see in hubs. Cartridge bearings, which are commonplace. When they wear out, of course, you can get away with lifting off the seals, putting a bit more grease in them, but generally when they wear, it's because you've got play in them and you'll have to replace them. So you'll need to drift them out using a bearing puller, a drift, a punch, something like that, and then press in some brand new ones. And then it should be good to go. But traditionally we used to use cup and cone bearings. So you'd have a threaded axle and you'd have cones on them and they'd have lock nuts. You'd be able to adjust the cones up against bearings that sat in a race. Basically you could take the play out of them. Now, I'd kind of lean and say it's actually almost a bit of a better system when it's made correctly and you maintain them correctly, of which I assume a lot of people probably were just annoyed by doing that. So the kind of industry moved towards cartridge bearings, but I've got no issue. I've got some old XTR wheels that are cup and cone and they're as smooth as the day I had them. And these are 26, so they must be, I don't even know how old they are. They're ancient and they're still just as smooth. They're brilliant. I've got no issues. Anyone else out there still using cup and cone bearings? Let us know what you think down there. I guess the only thing you could probably fault arguably with cup and cone bearings on modern bikes is the fact the way that you adjust that cup and cone to keep them tight, they could vibrate and rattle loose just with the way that we ride bikes in this day and age. But keen to hear from any mechanics as well down there. Let us know your thoughts on cartridge versus cup and cone. Next one from Andy Gordon. A little Doddy challenge. In the spirit of your Eurobike coverage, do you think, oh hello, do you think you could spec or build, well I won't be doing the build right now, a bike wholly from European manufacturers, frame components, wheels, tyres, a lot, kind of like shopping local? Do you know, I've thought about this a lot because there's European Bike Project, or whatever the handle is, it's going to be on the screen there, on Instagram, and they post some amazing stuff with all these European brands. I have thought about it, but never actually done it. So Matt, ironically, Matt the cameraman filming this, we were hanging out at Eurobike, and I said, if I was to like go alone tomorrow and have to buy a bike at full retail price on my own steam, I'd probably buy a Nikolai. As far as frames go, I really like their approach to things. I like the fact that you're not stuck with standards and things, and they just think. So yeah, I'd go for a Nikolai frame. The hardware and the bearings and stuff, arguably they're probably not from Europe. I might be wrong on that. They might have spec'd specific ones, but let's just push that aside. So the frame, the fork, I'd go for an Intend. I've not ridden one. I felt one on Greg's bike from TF Tuned, and it feels unbelievable. So yeah, I'd have one of those on there. I'd have an EXT shock, the air shock, which is Aria. Yeah, nothing wrong with Astoria or coil shocks. I just always love air shocks. Sometimes with a camera bag, you want to put a bit more wind in the shock. Other times, you know, you want to tune it for a friend to ride, whatever. It's just convenient. So do that. Headset, probably just bung a Hope in there. Same with the stem. Handlebars, I know that Hope make handlebars. I'm not aware of many other brands that do other than Schmalk, which I probably wouldn't use something that light. Brakes, Trick Stuff, no brainer. And if I was only going to ride one bike, again, I'd have Trick Stuff brakes. I think the problem with Trick Stuff brakes is they're so good that if you ride multiple bikes, and I think Neil's actually said this, they're so powerful that actually going between them and other brand brakes is a bit of a problem. You can't get used to them that quickly. One bike, you had to go for those. Saddles, Cellitalia is an Italian brand. Ergon, German brand, but I'm fairly sure that Cellitalia have a sort of green credential range that are still made in Italy and they're handmade. So if so, I'd pick one of those because the Flight saddle, their early classic saddle, is the most iconic and probably the comfiest saddle ever in my eyes. So the nearest to that. Seat post, no idea. Bike yoke, European, but don't know where they're made. Let's just say bike yoke, unless anyone can suggest one. Cranks, Sturdy Cycles make some cool stuff, and Chainring D Ward, local from Bath, that's Ed. His stuff's beautiful, so yeah, put some of his stuff on there. Pedals, I can't think of a clip-in pedal that I could use, but Pembury make really nice flat pedals, beautifully made, so put some of those on there. All right, so drivetrain. So chain, arguably you could say that the SRAM chains, or at least the top end ones, are made in Portugal in their factory, so you could put one of those and that would count, and it's a German-American brand. Cassette mech, not sure, so I would go with that pinion gearbox, maybe. With the Smart Shift, the new one, that sounds pretty cool. Not actually sure where it's made, but we'll go with that. Hubs, DT or Hope, rims, DT Swiss, tyres, Continental, those Cryptotail tyres, they've turned the brand around. I think those tyres are insane. Grips, no idea. There you go. There's a rough selection. Just off the top of my head, really, just thinking about things. But yeah, there's loads of cool brands out there. It'd be good to do that, and then maybe like an American project and some other ones. But yeah, very cool. And also, like I said, don't forget to check out European Bike Project Instagram handle on the screen. There'll be links down there as well. Next up, did anybody actually buy the Merlin Newsboy back in the day? Flipping heck, I've never even seen one of those. I saw one way back. So in case anyone's wondering, Merlin, they make titanium frames. Arguably some of the most beautiful frames, and certainly were in the 90s. And they made a bike called the Newsboy. I could never work out if it was a genuine bike or if it was a bit of a piss take, because it was essentially a paperboy style bike, like a beach cruiser, but made of the most expensive metal at the time you could build a bike from. I've got a feeling they made like a small amount, like 50 or 100 or something. If anyone out there's got one, let's see it. I've never seen one in the wild. Yeah, I'd love one of those, but no, never seen one. Right, next one's from Rob G301 Rides. Chain wax or oil? Give us some pros and cons. Okay, so oils and waxes, right? So let's start with oils. You get wet oils and you get dry oils. Of course, you get loads of different variants within that, but if you keep it simple, wet oils, they're designed for wet conditions. Basically, they're thick, viscous liquid, can be really messy, but they're designed to stay put. So when it's howling a gale and just raining out there, that's what you want. Arguably, if you've got an e-bike, they're great because they're going to deal with torque really well. It stays in place. You ride in dry conditions, you're going to attract all that crap onto your drivetrain that you don't want on there. And then you get dry lubes, which is, I guess, kind of a bit of an oxymoron because they're not really dry, they're wet when you put them on and then they evaporate. So that's the cool thing with a dry lube. So have a carrier fluid that is. It's typically a solvent, and then you have the lubricating particles in there. Put it on your chain and then leave it before you ride, and then that carrier liquid will evaporate, leaving your chain dry to touch. That's why it's called a dry lube. Brilliant. I love dry lubes for almost all year round because of the way I maintain my bike, but that's not for everyone. And then you get wax. So wax falls into two categories. You get wax lubes and then you get proper chain wax. So proper chain wax, you would actually have to remove your chain from the bike, and it's basically like a hot dip. Now this is rumoured to be incredible, but in mountain biking terms, I see it's completely pointless because of the fact you've got to remove your chain to do it. It's a big laborious process. And compared to our road riding friends, we've got other more pressing maintenance to do, like servicing your forks and things like that, that you're just going to get more benefit from. Not against it, it's just I don't see the point. But you can get wax-based chain lubes. Now, there's various different ones on the market. We use PT's lubes. Now, they're dry lube. I've actually got some on my chain here. This bike's done a few rides now, and I've just been topping up on the lube. And the thing I've got to say about it is it doesn't attract anything. It runs really clean. Now, unlike regular dry lubricants that you get that have a carrier liquid that evaporates made from solvent, the carrier liquid on this is an emulsion, so it's made from water, and because of that, it can carry loads of that wax in there. Now, it does dry up. It takes a bit longer to dry. It's not instant like the solvents, but the result is you get more lube on the chain. Works great. I like it. There you go. There's some pros and cons for you. I meant to say one of the cons with using certainly sort of a dry wax and a dry lube in general, you run them in the foul, raining conditions, they're not going to last as long. You pick your lube for conditions. Right, Spanner Chimp, another local, thank you for commenting. Currently running Vittoria Barzo's on your recommendation, good choice. Have you any experience or knowledge with the Vittoria Syerra Down Country tyres? I think Mazza's are too much for what type of riding I do, XT style. I asked as I went to the Scout meet at One Planet Adventure, and the Barzo's performed great, but I needed more grip. Yeah, actually, then the Syerra could be a perfect tyre for you. So the Syerra has got the same compound as the Barzo, essentially on the side. The Barzo's are full compound, but it's all over, whereas the Barzo is all over, whereas the Syerra's got a firmer compound on the top and softer shoulders. Which makes it a bit better in the corner. It's got a slightly more angular shoulder. I'd say the tread is kind of like, it doesn't look like a Mazza, but it kind of performs a bit like a lightweight Mazza, so kind of where you're going. The beauty of the Syerra is the casing though. So your Barzos are 120 TPI, so threads per inch. The Syerra is 60 threads per inch. Now, there's not gaps between those threads, they're just bigger, fatter threads. Now, as a result, the carcass, even though it's not like a thick carcass in the sense of a downhill or enduro tyre, is much thicker than a cross-country tyre. And they designed them like this with the 60 TPI casing so you could lower the pressures on them. Now, for me, I actually prefer running Barzos, Mezcals and other cross-country tyres because of the 120 TPI, because I'll run them at about 30 pounds and it actually feels to me, my body weight, more like about 26. Whereas when I run the Sierras, like you can run those as low as 18 PSI. You really need to run them as soft as you can run them to get the best from them because of the fact you've got the support from the sidewalls. But for me, if I run them at a pressure I need to run them at, which is probably about 28 or 29 on those, then they feel a little bit harsh because they don't have that sort of elastic stroke in the sidewalls that you get with the thinner casing. But for you, I'd say they could be perfect. It's a very, very good tyre. And I think actually kind of, it goes under the cover a little bit with the other tyres out there. The Mazza is excellent. One other option you might want to consider is the Agaro. So check that out. So my summer preference, although I'm not running it at the moment, is a Mazza on the front on my trail bike and an Agaro on the rear. But I've run the Agaro on the front before on a cross-country bike around the Barzo trail on the rear, which is a pretty good combo. So check all those things out. Good luck. Next up from BRZ, David. What's the history and innovation of the mountain bike rear derailleur? They've been coming up with crazy innovations the past years. What about the older years, like the Honda bikes? Wow, flipping heck. All right, so this will have to be a very quick look through these, but I'm gonna throw you to a video I made on, basically it's my love letter to Shimano's Derailleur XT. So kind of go through the range there a little bit on where XT came in, which was really the first shifting for mountain biking. So before that, you had what's called friction shifting. So you had a thumb shifter and it didn't have the clicks. Oh, I'm pointless showing you clicks on that one, it's got access, but it doesn't have those defined clicks that we know now as indexing. You would literally just move the shifter and it would stay in place because of these micro clicks. You'd move it until it changed gear. So you couldn't guarantee you're going to change 1, 2, 3 or 4. But it did mean if you bent anything, you could sort of micro adjust it, which is good. And you could do all of your gears in one sweep. Good, but a bit annoying. So Shimano developed SIS, which we first saw on Shimano's Derailleur XT, 1982 or whenever it was that first came out. I've forgotten my dates at the moment. Bit later on, more stuff came into the market, things started getting refined. Paul's Components, a US company, made a rebuildable derailleur, which in my eyes is still one of the most beautiful things ever. So I did a Klein video, a load of retro Kleins, and they had the front mech and both generations of the rear. The special thing about these, other than the fact it costs an arm and a leg, and the fact they're anodized and full CNC machine, was you could fully strip them down and rebuild them, which to me made the price worthwhile considering how much we used to destroy derailleurs in those days. And it's funny because at the moment you've got the latest Access stuff in SRAM, which is very, very good. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's amazing, you can rebuild it. It's like, Paul's Components did that in the 90s. So very cool, but Honda system that you referenced, that was pretty much a chainer cassette in a box and mid-mounted on a bike with a high pivot. Awesome system, but just a concept. No one's really kind of gone there, except for Williams Racing Products and Trinity MTB. Their links are going to be down there, and hopefully there's going to be a little flash on screen of what looks like a prototype gearbox with a clear casing. Love to have a go on that. That looks, it looks so good. Then you've got obviously clutch derailleurs came in place. Shimano put the clutch on there, it's like a little mini Sprag clutch to give tension on the lower cage. SRAM had their cage lock system, so obviously had a clutch, but you couldn't turn it on or off, but you could lock the cage out, both of which were designed so you could remove the wheel easily. Electronic gears, which you see in Shimano did Di2, SRAM's done Access, and they've got the latest version. The UDH on the rear, which you're probably going to see more people taking up now that SRAM have done that direct mount derailleur, does away with all the problems, in theory, you get with derailleurs. But you've got hub gears as well. So you've got Roll-Off that had the 14-speed gear hub. Kindone rode one of those, really surprised by it. Hub gear, I forget how many gears they had. Pinion gearbox, the latest pinion gearbox. The pinion gearbox with the motor they've just done. The pinion gearbox with the smart shift. Man, they're flying, these guys. FE gear. Oh, there you go. There's a quick kind of history and background on them. I've got a dry mouth, I need a cup of tea now, I think. There we go. Thanks for all the great questions. This was a great last minute one and quite comfy to it. Yeah, I like it. Let us know what you thought of the show. Leave us some feedback down there. More importantly, get involved with some questions for us. And if you don't already subscribe to the channel, please do subscribe. Share our content around. It's free. We make the content for you. So if there's something you want to see, let us know in the comments and we'll see you again soon. Ta-ra.